This is Algebra 2, test number 9 through section 6.6 study guide. Number 1 says factor each expression, negative 12x squared minus 9x plus 12. Take out what's common in each of those terms. The number 3 is, so 3 times negative 4x squared gives you negative 12x squared. 3 times negative 3x gives you negative 9x. And 3 times 4 gives you 4. So here's your factored version. 8x squared, what's common in these? They both have a 2 and they both have an x. So when you pull 2x out, multiply 2x times 4x is 8x squared, and 2x times 5 is plus 10x. Then we're factoring trinomials. What you need to do for x squared plus 17x plus 70 is you need to factor 70 out. So you have 1 and 70, 2 and 35, 5 and 12, and 7 and 10. You have to pick which pair out of those when you combine them gives you the number 17, the middle number. So 1 and 70, don't think of positives and negatives. Just think of when you combine them. That could either give you 69 or 71. 2 and 35 is either going to give you 33 or 37. 5 and 2 is either going to give you 17 or it's going to give you 5 and 17 is either going to give you 17 or it's going to give you 7. And 7 and 10 is either going to give you 17 or it's going to give you 3. So we have two options right here to get to 17. We have to choose which one, when we add them up, is going to give us the number 17. So we know that it's going to be x times x to get x squared. Basically, we're working FOIL in reverse. So we either have to use 5 and 12 or 7 and 10. Now, the way that we can determine which one it is, remember this sign in front of the third term in the trinomial tells us that it's going to be the same sign, either plus plus or minus minus. So when we subtract 5 and 12, or when we combine 5 and 12 negative, negative, that'll give us negative 17. Again, so we need to use numbers that we can add together. So the only ones we can use are 7 and 10 because they need to be the same sign. And this one tells us since they're the same sign, they have to be plus plus. So this is our factored version of our trinomial, x plus 7 times x plus 10. Same thing with this next one. You want to look at the third term, 24, and look at its factors. 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. The only ones when you combine them that's going to give you the number 11, the middle term, are 3 and 8. So we need to use, it's always x times x like this, and 3 and 8. So we have to determine, are they going to be plus or minus? That's next. So this sign here tells us that they're going to be the same. This sign tells us since they're the same, they're both negative. So x minus 3 times x minus 8. Same thing with number 5, the factors of the third term, 21. Which ones can you combine and get the number 4? The only ones are 3 and 7. So x and 4, I'm sorry, not 4. X, so 3 and 7. This number, remember, this sign tells you that they're going to be different. If it's plus, they're the same. If it's minus, they're going to be different. This one tells you since they're different, the larger number is plus. 7 is the higher absolute value. It's the larger number, so it's plus, and 3 is negative, or 3 is minus. So x minus 3 times x plus 7. Number 6 is a special case because it has a perfect square in its first term and a perfect square in its last term. So take the square root of the first term. Square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of x squared is x. And take the square root of the third term. Square root of 9 is 3. So 5x and then 3, and then this sign tells you it's going to be plus in the middle. So 5x plus 3 squared. You're squaring a binomial to factor the trinomial. Number 7 says 4x squared minus 9. Now this one is different because it's the difference of two perfect squares. Again, the square root of this is 2x, and the square root of this is 7, but it's the difference of two perfect squares. So it's 2x plus 7 times 2x minus 7. That's the difference because one's plus and one's minus when you're talking about the difference of two perfect squares. Number 8 says simplify the square root of negative 108 using the imaginary number I. So the first thing you need to do is you need to take the square root of 108 and multiply it by I to take the negative out. Then you have to determine, is there a perfect square that's a factor of 108? Remember your perfect squares, 3 times 3, 4 times 4, 5 times 5, 6 times 6. And this is the one we're actually going to use because the square root of 36 multiplies by 3 to give you 108. Make sure you bring down your I before you forget it. So that's I times 6 times the square root of 3. Or if you reordered that just to make it look a little bit neater, you would say 6I times the square root of 3. Write the number in the form a plus bi. Again, first thing you need to do is take the negative out by calling it the square root of I times I. I'm sorry, the square root of 4 times I, or in this case, the way I wrote it, I times the square root of 4 plus 4. And then we know that the square root of 4 is 2. So it's actually plus or minus 2 because it could be negative 2 or positive 2. So we have I times positive or negative 2 plus 4. And since it's 2 times that, we can't add it. It's not like terms. So all we can do is put it in a plus bi. So put the constant term 4 first, plus or minus 2i. Negative 1 minus square root of negative 12. Again, first thing you want to do is take out the negative by multiplying it by I. So you have negative 1 minus I times the square root of 12. And we could separate the square root of 12 into the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. It's still multiplying by I. It's still being subtracted from negative 1. So we have negative 1 minus I times 2 times the square root of 3. Remember, it's plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3. So if we were to rewrite this just to make the form better, just to put it in the form that it asks, a plus bi, negative 1 minus negative 1 minus 2i times the square root of 3. Solving this equation says x squared plus 14x plus 49 equals 36. Let's go to number 12. 3y plus 8 equals negative 4 minus y. Put all your y's on one side by adding y to this side. Do the same here. Bring everything else to the other side by subtracting 8 here and subtracting it on this side. So what we're left with, 3y plus y is 4y equals negative 4 minus 8 is negative 12. Then get rid of 4 times something by dividing by 4. Y is negative 3. Distribute 6 times y is 6y. 6 times 8 is plus 48. So negative y plus 11 equals 6y plus 48. Move your y's over to your larger y side. Add y to this one. Add it to this one. Subtract 48 from the side your variable terms are on, and subtract 48 from this side. 48 minus 11, since they're opposites, is going to be negative 37 equals 6y plus y is 7y. So negative 37 equals 7y. Divide by 7 on both sides, and you're left with, I'm going to put it right here just to save a little space, y equals negative 37 over 7. Get rid of plus 7 by subtracting it on both sides. Subtract it on the right as well. 8n, you subtract 7 from it, is 24. Divide by 8 to cancel out multiplication of 8. N equals 3. Okay, 5y plus 2 equals 60. 5 times y is 5y. 5 times 2 is plus 10 equals 60. Get rid of plus first by subtracting 10. Do the same on the right. 5y equals 50. And get rid of 5 times something by dividing by 5 on both sides. Y is 10. Find a missing value to complete the square. Well, when you're talking about completing the square, remember it's ax squared plus bx plus c. So we're looking for c. In order to find c, it's the value of b divided by 2 squared. So we have ax squared plus bx. So our value for b this time is 16. So c equals 16 divided by 2 squared. C equals 8 squared, or c's value is going to be 64 in this case. So in that place, we'd put plus 64. It says solve the quadratic equation by completing the square. First off, you have to make it say ax squared plus bx plus c. C is not a perfect square, 22. So we have to move plus 22 over by subtracting 22. When you subtract 22 from both sides, you get x squared plus 10x equals negative 22. So we have to find the value of c. And off to the right, we have over here, you take b and you divide it by 2 and square it. B divided by 2 is 5, and 5 squared is 25. So you have x squared plus 10x plus 25, adding in the value of c. But since you add it on the left side, you have to add in 25 on the right side. So we have a perfect trinomial now. X squared plus 10x plus 25 equals, when you add negative 22 and 25 together, you get 3. So since you have two perfect squares, the first and the third term in the trinomial, you can take the square root of each of them. The square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 25 is 5. The sign before the 10x tells you that you're going to put plus between the x and the 5, and you're going to square it. So x plus 5 squared equals 3. Again, that's just squaring a binomial to factor a perfect trinomial. Then in order to get rid of x plus 5 squared, you take the square root of it. You have to do likewise to the right side. Leaves you with x plus 5 equals the square root of 3. And when you get rid of plus 5 by subtracting, you get x equals negative 5 on the right plus or minus the square root of 3. Again, completing the square, x squared plus 12x plus 41. Again, 41 is not a perfect square, so subtract 41 on both sides. It leaves you with x squared plus 12x equals negative 41. Again, you have to find c's value because it has to say ax squared plus bx plus c. So b's value is 12. Divide that by 2 and you get 6. Square 6 and you get c's value of 36. So on the left, we're going to plug in c's value 36. But since you add 36 to the left, you have to do likewise to the right. So now we have x squared plus 12x plus 36 equals negative 41 plus 36. When you combine negative 41 and 36 on the right, it leaves you with negative 5. So that's a perfect trinomial now. X squared plus 12x plus 36. That means you can take the square root of the first one, x squared, and it leaves you with x. And you could take the square root of the third one, 36, and it's 6. The sign before 12x, it's plus, so between x and 6, you're going to put plus and squared. So the binomial x plus 6 squared is equal to negative 5. In order to get rid of squaring something like x plus 6, you take the square root of it. You have to do likewise to the right and take the square root of negative 5. Now we have a negative value, so we have to pull that negative value from underneath that radical. So x plus 6 equals I times the square root of 5. And then in order to get x by itself, you subtract 6 on both sides. So x equals negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 5i. Rewriting it in vertex form, get 18 is not a perfect square to make it a perfect trinomial. So you have y equals x squared plus 10x, subtract 18 on both sides. That leaves you with y minus 18 equals x squared plus 10x. We have to have plus c. So in order to find c, you take b's value, which is 10, divided by 2 and square it. So c's value is going to be 25. But you have to add 25 to both sides. So now you have x squared plus 10x plus 25, which is a perfect trinomial. And you have plus 25 on the left side. So since it's a perfect trinomial, take the square root of the first term, x squared, which is x, and the perfect, the square root, actually, I made a mistake here. Go back and change this real fast. Just one little small mistake. It would be 5. The square root of 25 is 5. The plus before the 10 tells you that it's going to be plus between them. And then it's going to be squared. So you have y plus 7 equals x plus 5 squared. You have to move over plus 7 by subtracting it. Y equals x plus 5 squared minus 7 is your vertex form. Again, we have vertex form. Y equals negative 4x squared plus 32x. Looking at quadratic form. Okay, we're back. We're looking at quadratic form. To solve this equation, here's your quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So it's in standard form, 2x squared plus 7x plus 5 equals 0, where you can see a, b, and c. All you need to do is plug each of the values in. In place of b, you plug in 7. In place of A, you plug in 2, and in place of C, you plug in 5. Then you just simplify what we have. A negative 7 plus or minus 7 squared is 49, and negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 times 5 is negative 40. So the square root of 49 minus 40, 2 times 2 is 4. So when we simplify the square root of 49 minus 40 is the square root of 9. So you have negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 9 over 4, or negative 7 plus the square root of 9 is 3 over 4, or negative 7 minus 3 over 4, which when we simplify the top, negative 7 plus 3 is negative 4 over 4, and negative 7 minus 3 is negative 10 over 4. And so when we simplify those two fractions, we're left with x equals negative 1, or x equals negative 5 over 2. Again, 5x squared plus x minus 9, we can see A, B, and C. Plug the values in for A, B, and C, and you're left with this. Then when you simplify it, 1 squared is 1, negative 1's on the outside, and then negative 4 times 5 is negative 20 times negative 9 is positive 180. So the square root of 1 plus 180 is the square root of 181. So you have negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 181 over 10. Again, you can see A, B, and C. Plug them into the quadratic formula. When you do that, simplify it. Negative 3 squared is 9. Negative 4 times negative 3 is negative 12 times it's positive 12 times negative 5 is negative 60 again. So you have the square root of 9 minus 60. Simplify that, and you get the square root of negative 51. So 3 plus or minus, because you have negative minus a negative here, that's why it becomes positive 3, plus or minus, you have to take you have to make it say I times the square root of 51, because it's a square root of negative 51. So 3 plus or minus I times the square root of 51 over negative 6. Then solve the equation by finding square roots. Just work your order of operations backwards. Divide by 5 on both sides. X squared equals 30 divided by 5 is 6. Get rid of squaring something by taking the square root. X equals the square root of 6 plus or minus the square root of 6. Rationalize the denominator by multiplying it by it over itself. That gives you 5 times the square root of 6 over 6. Multiply and simplify. 6 times 3 is the square root of 18. We know a perfect square that goes into 18 is the square root of 9 over the square root of 2, which is 3 times the square root of 2. Again, plus or minus 3 times the square root of 2. Then we have foiling again. Foil your first terms, negative 8 times negative 6. Your outer terms, negative 8 times the square root of 2. Your inner terms, negative square root of 2 times negative 6. And your last terms, negative square root of 2 times positive square root of 2. You get 48 minus 8 times the square root of 2 plus 6 times the square root of 2 minus the square root of 4. When you combine your like terms, the square root, negative 8 times the square root of 2 and 6 times the square root of 2, it leaves you with negative 2 times the square root of 2. And then when you combine your like terms again, 48 and negative 2, you get 46 minus 2 times the square root of 2. 28 tells you to FOIL it again. 6 plus the square root of 3 squared means to FOIL that. Multiply it by itself. Again, first, outer, inner, and last leaves you with 36 plus 6 times the square root of 3 plus 6 times the square root of 3 plus the square root of 9. Combine your two like terms, 6 plus the square root of 3, and you get 12 plus the square root of 3. Then combine 36 and the square root of 9, which is 3, and it leaves you with 39 plus 12 times the square root of 3. Then simplify by combining like terms. Negative 2 times negative y is positive 2y. Negative 2 times 8 is minus 16 minus 4y. Then you have like terms, 2y and negative 4y, so that's negative 2y minus 16 is all you can do with that one. And then finally, the last one tells you to graph y equals negative 1/2 x minus 2. It's in slope-intercept form already. M shows you the slope, negative 1/2. B shows you the y-intercept, negative 2. Remember, B tells you where to begin. So begin on the y-axis at negative 2. M tells you the slope, or it tells you where to move. It's negative 1 over 2, so it tells you to go down 1 and to the right 2. So down 1 and over 1, 2. There's where your second point goes. And when you have your second point there, you can connect through your 2 points to draw your line or show your graph.